Please, kill my stepdad." The words hung in the alley like gun smoke. 5 men in tailored suits and leather jackets turned from the black SUV convoy, their conversations dying mid-sentence. In the pool of flickering streetlight stood a child no older than 8, clutching 7 blood-stained $100 bills in trembling hands. If you're hooked in and want to enjoy this story, go ahead and subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see where everyone's watching. Plus, tomorrow I've got another incredible story lined up, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Alright, back to the story. Marco DeLuca was the first to move. The man known throughout the city as the Wolf knelt slowly, his tattooed hands resting on his knees, bringing himself to eye level with the boy. His crew Vince, Luca, Rico, and Tomas watched in stunned silence. In 20 years of running the DeLuca family, they'd never seen their boss kneel for anyone. "What's your name, son?" Marco's voice was surprisingly gentle. "Eli," the boy whispered, his split lip trembling. "Eli, where did you get these bruises?" The child's good eye, the one that could still fully open, met Marco's gaze with a desperation that cut deeper than any knife. "My stepdad beats me and my mom. Tonight was really bad." Marco's jaw tightened, the only visible sign of the rage building behind his controlled exterior. "Where does this stepdad live?" "The blue house on Willow Street, about 2 miles from here." Eli's voice cracked. "Please, I saved every dollar I could find. I heard you're the man who fixes things." Every man in that alley knew Willow Street. It was the east side where domestic calls went unanswered until someone turned up dead, where neighbors learned to ignore screaming, where corruption ran deeper than the sewers. Rico stepped forward, his hand already moving toward his jacket. "Boss, let's go handle this right now." "Wait." Marco's command cut through the night. But what he said next shocked them all. Marco stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Eli's battered face. "This boy just offered us $700 to commit murder." He let the weight of that sink in. That means this kid is so desperate, so terrified, that he walked 2 miles in the dark alone to find killers. The crew exchanged glances. Vince's fists clenched. Luca's expression went cold. They all understood what Marco was really saying. "The system failed him," Tomas muttered, his voice bitter. "Cops don't do jack about domestic situations until somebody's in the morgue. Then we handle it the old way," Rico suggested, his hand still near his concealed weapon. "Send a message." Eli's eyes widened, a mixture of terror and desperate hope swirling in that single expression. He'd asked monsters to do monstrous things, and now he was watching them decide his fate. Marco made a decision that would change everything. "Call Doc." Doc wasn't a doctor. He was their guy, the ex-paramedic who'd lost his license after a malpractice suit, now running a legitimate clinic that asked no questions. He arrived within minutes, his medical bag in hand, and knelt beside Eli under the harsh alley lights. His examination lasted less than 2 minutes. When Doc looked up, his face was ashen. "Broken ribs," he announced quietly. "Possibly cracked sternum. The swelling around his abdomen." He looked at Marco. "This kid needs a hospital. Could be internal bleeding." The alley erupted. Vince kicked the nearby dumpster with explosive force. Luca started pacing like a caged animal. Rico and Tomas exchanged the kind of look that usually preceded someone disappearing. These hardened criminals, men who'd seen and done terrible things, were ready for blood. Eli's stepdad had just sealed his own fate. "Please," Eli sobbed, clutching at Marco's suit jacket with blood-smeared fingers. "Please help my mom," he said. "He said tonight he's going to kill her." That's when they heard the sirens. Everyone tensed. For men with records, with warrants, with secrets buried in shallow graves, police sirens meant one thing: run. But the convoy of red and blue lights screamed past their position, racing eastward toward Willow Street. Luca breathed. Marco's phone buzzed. He answered with a curt, "What?" Then his expression went darker than the night surrounding them. Shots fired at the Willow Street address, his inside contact reported. Multiple units responding. Eli collapsed to his knees on the oil-stained pavement. No, Mom. Marco caught the boy before he hit the ground completely, his strong arms suddenly gentle. Over Eli's head, he looked at his crew, and they saw something in their boss's eyes they'd rarely witnessed. Not just anger, but purpose. "Get the cars ready," Marco said quietly, lifting Eli into his arms. "We're going to Willow Street." What happened next would break every rule the DeLuca family had carefully maintained. Because Marco DeLuca was about to do something far more dangerous than killing. He was about to save someone. The convoy tore through the city streets like black lightning, engines roaring against the night. In the back seat of the lead SUV, Marco held Eli close, feeling the boy's rapid heartbeat against his chest, a fragile drum of terror and hope. "She's going to be okay," Marco said, though he'd learned long ago never to make promises he couldn't keep. "We're going to make sure of it." Eli looked up at him with that one good eye, and Marco saw himself reflected there, not the crime lord, not the wolf, but something he'd buried years ago. A father who'd failed once, who wouldn't fail again. They arrived at Willow Street to chaos. Police cruisers blocked both ends of the narrow road, their lights painting the neighborhood in strobing red and blue. Ambulances idled near a small house with peeling blue paint. Eli's house. Yellow crime scene tape already cordoned off the property. Neighbors huddled on porches, their faces a mixture of curiosity and practiced indifference. This was the kind of street where people learned not to see too much. "Stay in the car," Marco ordered, but Eli was already pressing against the window, his breath fogging the glass. "That's him," the boy whispered, his voice hollow with recognition. A man stood near the police cars, tall, broad-shouldered, with the confident posture of someone who knew the system. His shirt was torn, a convincing scratch on his cheek, his expression the perfect mask of a concerned husband. Darren Cole, ex-cop, current informant, professional liar. Marco watched him perform for the officers, gesturing animatedly toward the house, shaking his head with practiced sorrow. The cops nodded sympathetically, taking notes. One even patted Darren's shoulder. "He's telling them Mom attacked him," Eli said, his voice breaking. "He always does this. He always makes them believe him." Vince leaned forward from the driver's seat. "Boss, we can't get closer without drawing attention. Half these cops know our faces." Marco's mind worked rapidly, calculating angles. They couldn't approach directly, couldn't be seen, but they also couldn't leave not until they knew Eli's mother was alive. "Luca, take the boy to the safe house on 5th Street, Marco commanded. "Rico, Tomas, find out what happened here. Use the scanner, call our contacts. I want to know everything." "What about you?" Vince asked. Marco's eyes never left Darren Cole. "I'm going to watch him, and then I'm going to learn everything about him." As the other vehicles pulled away, Marco remained, his SUV parked 3 blocks down with a clear sightline. He watched Darren play his role, the concerned husband whose wife had a mental episode, the victim of domestic violence, the man who'd called for help. Rico's voice crackled through the radio. "Boss, I got the scanner feed. Dispatch logged it as a domestic disturbance. Husband reporting his wife attacked him with a kitchen knife. Wife's been taken to Mercy General for psychiatric evaluation. No charges filed yet." Psychiatric evaluation. Marco's blood ran cold. It was brilliant, in a sociopathic way. Darren wasn't just covering his abuse, he was building a legal case to have her declared unstable. Discredited. Unbelievable. "Pull his records," Marco said quietly. "Everything. Employment, financials, associates. I want to know what he had for breakfast 10 years ago." Within the hour, the information started flowing in. Luca, using contacts in the municipal database, pulled Darren's jacket. "Boss, this is interesting. Darren Cole, 42. Decorated officer for 8 years before he retired on a medical pension PTSD from a shooting. Now works as a confidential informant for the district attorney's office." "An informant," Marco repeated slowly, pieces clicking together. "Gets better," Luca continued. "His bank records show deposits that don't match his pension. We're talking 20, 30 grand, at irregular intervals. And boss, one of those payments traces back to the Volkov crew." The Volkov crew, Marco's rivals. Russian mob operating out of the docks, dealing in everything from drugs to weapons to human trafficking, Marco finished aloud. "How did you—" "Because that's what corrupt cops do," Marco said, his voice deadly calm. "They don't just take one payoff. They build empires on the backs of people they're supposed to protect." At the safe house, Eli sat in an oversized chair, looking impossibly small. Doc had bandaged his ribs and given him something for the pain. The boy clutched a glass of water with both hands, his eyes distant. "Is my mom going to die?" he asked when Marco entered. Marco knelt down the second time that night and looked Eli in the eyes. "No," he said firmly. "But your stepdad made a mistake tonight. He left witnesses, he left evidence." And most importantly, Marco's expression hardened with purpose. He hurt someone I've decided to protect. Eli's lip trembled. Why are you helping us? We're nobody. Marco thought of his son, of the police raid, of arriving 3 minutes too late to say goodbye. You're not nobody, Eli. You're somebody who was brave enough to ask for help. Marco stood. Now get some rest. Tomorrow, we start fixing this. As he walked out, Vince was waiting with a tablet. Boss, you need to see this. The screen showed a familiar face in an old case file. Detective Howard, the officer who'd led the raid that killed Marco's son Mateo. And there, in the report's fine print, was a signature. Witness statement verified by Officer D. Cole. Marco's hands tightened on the tablet until the screen cracked. Darren Cole hadn't just hurt Eli. He'd destroyed Marco's family years ago. The safe house fell silent except for the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the corner. Marco stood alone in the study, holding a silver-framed photograph that never left his desk no matter which property he occupied. Mateo, 7 years old, gap-toothed smile, dark curls like his mother's, holding a baseball glove 3 sizes too big. The photo was taken 2 hours before the raid. Marco's thumb traced the frame's edge, a ritual he'd performed 1,000 times. The glass was worn smooth where he always touched his son's face, as if he could somehow reach through time and pull the boy back to safety. You had a boy too, didn't you? Marco turned sharply. Eli stood in the doorway, barefoot, wearing one of Doc's oversized t-shirts that hung to his knees. The boy's face was a patchwork of purple and yellow bruises, his bandaged ribs visible beneath the thin fabric. You should be sleeping, Marco said, but his voice lacked its usual command. I can't. Eli walked closer, his movements careful, guarded the walk of someone who'd learned to measure every step around dangerous men. But when he saw the photo, something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Shared grief. What was his name? Mateo. The name caught in Marco's throat like broken glass. He hadn't said it aloud in months. He was 7. I'm 8, Eli said quietly, as if this simple fact mattered, as if it connected them somehow. What happened to him? Marco set the photo down carefully, buying time, weighing how much truth a traumatized child could carry. But then he looked at Eli, really looked at him and saw someone who'd already carried more than any child should. The police came to one of my properties, Marco began, his voice flat, factual. There was intelligence about weapons, drugs, the usual accusations, most of them true. He paused. But Mateo wasn't supposed to be there. His mother and I, we were separated. She'd brought him by to pick up some of his things. Wrong place. Wrong time. The cops shot him? There was confusion, shouting. Someone thought they saw a weapon. Marco's jaw tightened. He was holding his toy car. Red Ferrari. His favorite. Eli moved closer, standing beside Marco, both of them staring at the photograph as if it were a window into the past. The investigation cleared everyone involved, Marco continued, the bitterness seeping through now. Justified use of force. The detective who led the raid, Howard, he wrote in his report that there were confirmed armed subjects in the building, that they'd followed protocol, that my son's death was tragic but unavoidable. But that was a lie. That was a lie, Marco confirmed, and someone signed off on that lie. Someone verified the witness statements. Someone helped bury the truth. He didn't need to say the name. The weight of it hung between them. Vince knocked softly and entered without waiting for permission, a privilege only his oldest friend had earned. Boss, we've got the full picture now. You need to see this. The tablet screen glowed with police reports, bank statements, and surveillance photos. Vince spread them across the desk like a dealer laying out a fatal hand of cards. Darren Cole isn't just an informant, Vince explained. He's a facilitator. The Volkov crew uses him to move product through police evidence lockup. He also provides them with information on witness protection placements. Marco's blood went cold. Witness protection? Families testifying against organized crime, Vince continued, his expression grim. The Volkovs pay him to leak locations, identities. Some of those families, boss, they just disappeared. The files say they relocated, but they're dead, Marco finished. Or worse. Luca appeared in the doorway, his face pale. Boss, there's more. I pulled the social services records for Eli and his mother. 3 different neighbors reported suspected abuse over the past year. 3 different times Child Protective Services opened investigations. And Marco already knew the answer. All 3 investigations were closed without action. The investigating officer each time noted that Officer Cole Eli's stepfather provided character references for the family, said the reports were malicious, filed by neighbors with grudges. Luca's voice shook with barely contained rage. He used his badge to keep people from helping them. Eli had been listening from the corner, his small body rigid. He told Mom nobody would believe her. He said he had friends everywhere. He was right, wasn't he? Marco turned to the boy, and for a moment, saw his own son standing there 7 years old, holding a toy car, seconds from death. He was right, Marco admitted. Until now. He gathered the documents, his mind already constructing a plan that would require precision, patience, and something he rarely allowed himself, faith in a system that had failed him. "We're not killing him," Marco announced, and his crew stirred with surprise. "We're doing something he won't see coming, something worse than death." "What's worse than death?" Eli asked, his voice small but curious. Marco looked at the photograph of Matteo one more time, then turned to face his men with renewed purpose. "We're going to make him face the truth. Every crime, every victim, every lie." His eyes hardened. "We're going to destroy everything he built on other people's suffering, and then we're going to make sure everyone, the courts, the media, the public, knows exactly what kind of monster wore a badge." Vince crossed his arms. "That's going to take time, boss. Maybe weeks. And every day we wait is a day we gather evidence," Marco interrupted. "Is a day we build a case so airtight that not even his cop friends can save him." He looked at Eli. "Your stepdad thinks he's untouchable. We're going to prove him wrong." Eli nodded slowly, something like hope flickering in his battered face. "And my mom? We protect her," Marco said simply. "Starting now." Outside, the city sprawled beneath them, millions of lights, millions of lives, and somewhere in that vast darkness, a predator who thought he'd won. Darren Cole had no idea the storm coming his way, or that it was being guided by a ghost's memory and a father's grief. The surveillance began at dawn. Rico sat in a nondescript sedan 3 blocks from Darren Cole's duplex, camera with a telephoto lens resting on his lap, a takeout coffee going cold in the cup holder. Tomas occupied the corner booth at Rosie's diner across the street, laptop open, headphones in, looking like any other remote worker. But his screen showed live feeds from 3 micro cameras they'd planted during the night, one on the streetlight, one in the alley, one disguised as a loose brick near Darren's front door. "Target's moving," Rico's voice crackled through the encrypted radio. "Black Dodge Charger, heading south on Main." Marco listened from the safe house, surrounded by monitors displaying feeds, financial records, and a growing web of connections drawn in red marker on a whiteboard. Eli sat nearby at a smaller desk, colored pencils scattered around him, drawing with the focused intensity of a child trying to escape into creation. "Stay on him," Marco ordered, "but keep distance. He's got cop instincts." Over the next 72 hours, a pattern emerged. Darren moved through the city like a shark through dark water, smooth, predatory, always aware of his surroundings. He visited the DA's office twice, spent an hour at a warehouse near the docks, and met with known Volkov associates at a strip club called the Red Room. But he also did something unexpected. He visited Mercy General Hospital every evening at 7 o'clock sharp. "He's checking on her," Luca reported, watching through binoculars from a parking garage across the street. "Goes to the psychiatric ward, talks to the nurses, plays the concerned husband. Stays exactly 15 minutes, then leaves." "He's maintaining his cover," Marco said, studying the surveillance photos, making sure everyone sees him as the victim. Vince entered the room with a tablet. "Boss, we got into his phone. Wasn't easy, he changes his passcode daily, but Rico planted a keylogger when he left it charging at the Red Room." He pulled up the screen. Text messages, encrypted calls, the works. "You were right. He's dirty in ways we didn't even imagine." The messages painted a portrait of corruption so deep it made Marco's empire look like a lemonade stand. Darren wasn't just an informant, he was a broker. He sold police intelligence to the Volkovs, provided advance warning of raids, and most damning of all, facilitated the disappearance of witnesses through falsified relocation documents. One message stood out, sent 3 weeks ago. "Package ready for pickup. Location compromised. Usual rate plus 10% for rush. DC." The response? "Confirmed. The family problem solved. You are valuable asset." Marco's hands tightened on the desk edge. "Family problem solved. Clinical. Efficient. Monstrous." "There's more," Vince said quietly, pulling up a PDF. This is from 8 years ago. Encrypted file on his personal cloud storage. He kept it as insurance, probably. It was a police report. The raid on Marco's property. But this version was different from the official one. This was the original, before Detective Howard had edited it. Before the lies had been written into history. In the margins, in Darren Cole's handwriting, Matteo De Luca, age 7, unarmed civilian casualty, no weapon found, recommend incident review. That recommendation had been struck through. Below it, Howard had written, report amended per discussion, operational necessity, witness verification, Officer D. Cole. Marco read it 3 times, each word a knife turning in old wounds. Darren had known. He documented the truth, then helped bury it for Marco checked the next page. A bank statement, $15,000. His son's life, erased for $15,000. Boss? Vince's voice was careful, concerned. You okay? Marco looked up. His expression perfectly calm, the kind of calm that preceded hurricanes. I'm fine. Keep gathering evidence. But he wasn't fine. At the smaller desk, Eli had stopped drawing. His latest sketch lay before him. Marco, Vince, Luca, Rico, and Tomas, standing together, rough but recognizable. Above them, in careful child's handwriting, the good guys. They look scary, Eli said, noticing Marco's attention. But they're protecting us. That makes them heroes, right? Something in Marco's chest cracked. This boy, this broken, hopeful, impossibly brave boy saw monsters as heroes because the real monsters wore badges and wedding rings. Eli, Marco said slowly, what if I told you we're not the good guys? That we've done terrible things? Eli considered this with the seriousness of someone twice his age. My teacher said people aren't all good or all bad. She said we're all just trying to do our best with what we know. He touched the drawing. You're trying to help us. That's your best right now. From the mouths of babes, Marco thought. That evening, Darren made a mistake. After his hospital visit, instead of going home, he drove to a motel on the edge of town, the Starlight, a pay-by-the-hour establishment where questions weren't asked. Rico followed at a distance, camera ready. Darren met someone in room 117. A woman, early 30s, nervous body language. The meeting lasted 30 minutes. When she left, she was crying and carrying a manila envelope. Rico got photos of everything. Run facial recognition, Marco ordered. 20 minutes later, they had a name. Jennifer Walsh, age 34, mother of 2. Her husband had been a witness in a federal racketeering case against the Volkovs. 3 months ago, the family entered witness protection. 2 months ago, they vanished. That envelope, Luca said, enhancing the photos. I can see the edge of what looks like photographs, and she's terrified. He's threatening her, Marco realized, showing her what happened to her family, making sure she stays quiet about whatever she knows. This was it, the leverage they needed. A living witness to Darren's crimes, terrified but alive. Find her, Marco commanded. Offer her protection, real protection, and get everything she knows about Darren Cole on record. As his crew mobilized, Marco returned to the whiteboard, adding Jennifer Walsh's name to the growing web. The trap was taking shape, not built on violence, but on truth. Every connection, every transaction, every lie was being documented, verified, archived. Darren Cole thought he'd covered his tracks. He had no idea he was walking into a cage built from his own sins, and the door was about to slam shut. The file landed on Marco's desk at 3 a.m. Luca stood in the doorway, his face drawn with exhaustion, and something else hesitation, maybe even fear. In 20 years of working together, Marco had never seen his right-hand man afraid to deliver information. Boss, Luca said quietly, you need to see this, but I want you to sit down first. Marco remained standing. Just tell me. It's about the raid, the one that killed Matteo. Luca opened the folder with careful hands, like he was handling evidence from a crime scene which, Marco supposed, he was. I pulled the complete investigation file from our source at the archives. Not the public version. The internal affairs file. He spread the documents across the desk. Incident reports, witness statements, internal memos, photographs from the scene. Marco's eyes went immediately to one photo. His warehouse, police tape. A small white sheet, covering something too small to be an adult. His son. Detective Howard led the raid, Luca continued, his voice steady but soft. But the warrant application, the intelligence that justified the no-knock entry, it came from a confidential informant. He placed another document on top. Informant designation. CI 247. Real name redacted in the official report. But Internal Affairs did their due diligence. They documented everything. Luca's finger pointed to a name that had been blacked out in the public version, but remained visible in the IA file. Confidential informant. Darren Cole, badge, Cody 1270. The room tilted. Marco gripped the desk edge, his knuckles white against the dark wood. He provided the intelligence, Marco said slowly, each word costing him. The tip that led to the raid. Flest. It gets worse, boss. Luca pulled out another page, a transcript of a recorded conversation between Howard and Cole, dated 2 days after Mateo's death. Internal Affairs was investigating whether the informant's intel was reliable. This is from their interview. Marco read, his vision narrowing with each line. Howard, your information was good. We found the weapons cache exactly where you said. Cole. And the kid? That's going to be a problem. Howard. Not if we handle it right. The fathers DeLuca connected. Dangerous. The shooting was clean. Officer felt threatened. We stick to that. Cole. What about my payment? This was supposed to be straightforward. Howard. You'll get your money. But we need to adjust the report. Remove any mention of the child being unarmed. Can you verify the witness statements? For the right price, I can verify anything. The transcript continued, but Marco stopped reading. His hands were shaking, not with grief now, but with rage so pure it felt like ice in his veins. How much? Marco's voice was barely a whisper. How much did they pay him? Luca placed a bank statement on the pile. 15,000, deposited 3 days after the raid, listed as confidential informant compensation. $15,000. Mateo's laughter, his terrible knock-knock jokes, his obsession with dinosaurs, his habit of falling asleep during car rides with his mouth open. 7 years of life, infinite potential, immeasurable love, erased for $15,000 and a cover-up. There's one more thing, Luca said, and Marco heard the genuine apology in his voice. The weapons cache Cole tipped them about? It was real. You did have guns stored there, but boss. He pulled out evidence logs. The quantity Cole reported and what was actually found, it doesn't match. He inflated the numbers to justify the no-knock warrant, made it sound like an arsenal when it was maybe a dozen pieces. Marco had stored those weapons for protection, for his crew. He'd never denied being a criminal, but he'd been careful. The warehouse was supposed to be empty that day. Mateo wasn't supposed to be there, except someone had known they would be. He knew, Marco realized, the pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. Cole knew my son would be there. He'd been watching us, building his case. He inflated the threat level to guarantee a violent response. Boss, I don't think he wanted the kid to die, Luca said carefully. But I think he didn't care if it happened. Collateral damage for a good payday. Marco walked to the window, staring out at the sleeping city. Somewhere out there, Darren Cole was in his bed, dreaming whatever monsters dreamed. Did he remember Mateo? Did he remember all the lives he'd destroyed with his signatures and his silence? Behind him, he heard soft footsteps. You're going to kill him now, aren't you? Eli stood in the doorway, pajamas wrinkled, hair sticking up, looking impossibly small and impossibly wise. The boy had the gift or curse of understanding things children shouldn't have to understand. That's what I would do, Eli continued, walking closer. If someone hurt someone I loved and I found out who did it, I'd want them dead. Marco knelt down, bringing himself to Eli's eye level, a gesture that was becoming habit. Is that what you still want? For me to kill your stepdad? Eli was quiet for a long moment, his fingers playing with the hem of his shirt. I don't know anymore. When I came to you, I was so scared and so angry. I thought that was the only way. But then you helped us without killing anyone. You're catching him with truth instead of bullets. He looked up, his one good eye, the other still swollen, meeting Marco's gaze directly. If you kill him now, does that make you like him? From the mouths of babes. No, Marco said, and he realized he was answering himself as much as Eli. It makes me worse. Because I'd be choosing revenge over justice, and I'd be teaching you that might makes right. He stood, turning back to Luca. Double the surveillance. I want every move he makes documented, every call, every meeting, every breath. And find Jennifer Walsh. If she'll testify, we have enough to bury him legally. Luca nodded, relief evident in his expression. You sure about this, boss? The other way would be cleaner. The other way would be easier, Marco corrected. But this boy, he gestured to Eli, came to Killers for help and found something better. I'm not going to prove him wrong. As Luca left to coordinate with the crew, Marco looked at the photo of Matteo again. His son smiled up at him from frozen time. Forever 7, forever innocent. I couldn't save you, Marco whispered to the image. But I can save him, and maybe that's the point. Eli's hand slipped into his small, trusting, warm with life. Your son would be proud of you, the boy said simply. Marco squeezed gently, his vision blurring. I hope so, kid. I really hope so. Outside, dawn broke over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and gray. Somewhere, Darren Cole was waking up, unaware that his past and present were colliding. The trap was nearly set, and this time, Marco was building it not with violence but with something far more permanent. The truth. The plan went into motion on a Tuesday, not because Tuesdays were significant, but because that's when everything aligned. Jennifer Walsh agreed to testify, the files were compiled, and most importantly, Darren Cole made his weekly visit to collect his informant payment from the DA's office. He had no idea he was walking into his last day of freedom. Marco sat in the safehouse war room, surrounded by his crew and enough evidence to bury 10 men. Bankers' boxes filled with documents lined the walls. 3 laptops streamed data to secure servers, and in the center of it all, a single thumb drive containing 8 years of corruption, violence, and lies. Everyone clear on their roles? Marco asked, his voice calm despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. Rico nodded. I've got the journalist at the Tribune. She's hungry, ambitious, and hates dirty cops. Soon as she gets the file, she'll run with it. The FBI contact is ready, Tomas added. Anonymous tip, untraceable. They'll have everything: wire transfers, encrypted messages, the witness protection leaks, all corroborated. Social media accounts are prepped, Luca said, pulling up multiple screens. Burner profiles, VPNs layered 6 deep. The moment the news breaks, it'll flood every platform. There won't be a corner of the internet where his face isn't visible. Vince leaned back, arms crossed. And if he runs? He won't, Marco said with certainty. Men like Darren don't run. They think they're untouchable. By the time he realizes what's happening, every exit will be sealed. Eli sat at his usual desk, no longer drawing but watching with intense focus. He'd become their small, silent witness, a reminder of why they were doing this the hard way instead of the easy way. What about my mom? Eli asked, the question he asked every morning. She's safe, Marco assured him. Tomas has 2 guys outside her hospital room. The moment this breaks, we move her to a private facility under a different name. Darren won't get within a mile of her. At 9:47 a.m., the first domino fell. The Tribune published their front-page story. Former officer linked to witness protection breaches. Organized crime. By 10:15 a.m., the FBI announced an investigation into corruption within the district attorney's confidential informant program. By 11 a.m., Darren's name was trending on every social media platform. His photo, the one from his decorated police ceremony, shared thousands of times alongside screenshots of damning evidence. By noon, the world knew what Darren Cole was. Marco watched it unfold on the monitors like a carefully orchestrated symphony. Every revelation, every retweet, every news alert was another nail in the coffin. Boss, Rico said, phone pressed to his ear. He's moving. Left the DA's office 10 minutes ago, driving erratically. My contact says he walked out in the middle of a meeting. Looked like he'd seen a ghost. Where's he heading? Home. Wait, no. He just turned. He's going toward Mercy General. Marco's blood went cold. Get there. Now. Do not let him near that hospital. But even as his crew mobilized, Marco knew they might be too late. Darren wasn't stupid. Cornered animals were the most dangerous. And right now, Darren was watching his life disintegrate in real time. He'd need leverage. A hostage. Eli's mother. Take me with you, Eli said, already standing. Absolutely not. She's my mom. Tears streamed down the boy's face. What if he gets to her? What if... Marco knelt, gripping Eli's shoulders firmly but gently. Listen to me. Your job is to stay here, where you're safe. My job is to protect your mother. I made you a promise, remember? I keep my promises. But... no buts. Marco's voice softened. I couldn't save my son, but I can save your mother. Trust me. Eli nodded reluctantly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Marco's phone buzzed Vince, already en route. Boss, hospital security just called it in. Darren entered through the emergency entrance. He's got a visitor's badge somehow. He's still got contacts, Marco realized. Someone inside helping him. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, then paused, looking back at Eli. The boy stood surrounded by evidence of his stepfather's crimes. A small figure in a room full of monsters' work. Doc, Marco called. Stay with him. Nobody comes through that door but us. The drive to Mercy General took 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. Marco's mind raced through scenarios, contingencies, worst-case outcomes. He'd built his empire on control, on always being 3 moves ahead. But this was different. This involved innocence, hospitals, too many witnesses. This required precision he wasn't sure he possessed anymore. His phone rang. Luca's voice was tight with tension. Boss, we've got a problem. Hospital security found the 2 guys we had on protection detail. They're unconscious. Someone hit them with a taser. Darren? Had to be. He's in the building somewhere, and we've lost eyes on Eli's mother. They moved her this morning to a different floor for security reasons. We're trying to figure out which one. Marco's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Find her. And find Jennifer Walsh. If Darren knows about her testimony, he does, Luca interrupted grimly. Her story just went live on 3 major networks. Boss, if he gets to her, he won't. Where is she? Safe house in Queens. I've got Rico and 2 guys heading there now. The SUV screeched into the hospital parking garage. Marco emerged, adjusting his jacket to conceal the weapon he carried, a last resort he hoped he wouldn't need. Inside, the hospital hummed with controlled chaos. Nurses moved efficiently between rooms. Visitors clutched flowers and balloons. A child laughed somewhere down the hall. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that somewhere in this building, a desperate man was hunting. Tomas appeared from a stairwell, slightly out of breath. Psychiatric ward, 4th floor. They moved her to room 4C this morning. Private room, supposedly more secure. Supposedly, Marco repeated darkly. They took the stairs 3 at a time, emerging into a corridor that felt too quiet. A nurse's station sat unmanned. A medication cart stood abandoned mid-hallway. And at the end of the corridor, room 4C's door stood slightly ajar. Marco drew his weapon, moving silently. Tomas flanked him, hand near his own concealed piece. Through the gap, they could see movement shadows, struggling. Then a voice, desperate and familiar. Please, Darren, please don't. Eli's mother. Marco kicked the door open. The scene froze like a photograph. Darren Cole, wild-eyed and disheveled, holding a nurse by the throat with one hand, his other reaching for something, a syringe. Marco realized on the medical tray. Eli's mother cowered in the hospital bed, one arm in a cast, her face a map of old and new bruises. Get back! Darren screamed, grabbing the syringe and holding it like a weapon. Get back or You'll what? Marco's voice was cold, controlled. Kill her in front of a dozen witnesses? There are cameras in these halls, Darren. Security's already on their way. It's over. Over? Darren laughed, a sound edging toward hysteria. You did this. You destroyed everything. Do you know who I am? What I've done for this city? I know exactly what you've done, Marco said, taking one careful step forward. I know about the families you sold out, the witnesses who disappeared, the children who— They were criminals, Darren spat. All of them, they deserved. And Matteo De Luca? Marco's voice went quiet, deadly. What did a 7-year-old boy deserve? Recognition flashed in Darren's eyes, then fear. You're De Luca. You're the father, Marco finished. The father whose son you helped murder for $15,000. Sirens wailed outside. Real police this time, not the corrupt ones Darren had bought. The hospital intercom crackled. Security to 4th floor, psychiatric wing. Darren's face crumbled. The syringe trembled in his hand. I didn't mean. The kid wasn't supposed to be there. It was just supposed to be a raid. You didn't care, Marco corrected. That's worse than meaning to. The security team burst through the door, actual officers behind them. Darren dropped the syringe, and in that moment, he looked like what he truly was. Small, pathetic, defeated. As they pulled him away in handcuffs, Darren locked eyes with Marco one last time. You'll never prove anything. Marco smiled coldly. I already have. The call came 3 days later, at 2:47 a.m. Marco answered on the first ring, already moving. You didn't survive 20 years in his world by sleeping soundly. Boss, we've got a situation. Luca's voice carried the edge of controlled panic. Darren made bail. What? Marco was already pulling on his jacket. How? The charges. Judge Hendricks. He's on somebody's payroll, probably the Volkovs. Bail set at $500,000. Someone posted it an hour ago. Cash. Marco's mind raced. Darren was out, desperate and dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose and everything to burn. Where's Eli's mother? That's the problem. She checked herself out of the hospital this afternoon. Said she wanted to go home, get some of her things before the trial. We had a guy following her. But Luca's pause said everything. But? He's not responding. Last ping on his phone was near the old warehouse district on Pike Street. The warehouse district. Abandoned buildings, no witnesses, no cameras. The perfect place for someone to disappear. Assemble everyone, Marco ordered, and get Eli to the secondary safe house. Lock it down. Boss, there's more. Luca's voice dropped. Jennifer Walsh is gone too. Darren must have had someone watching our safe house. Her protection detail is dead. 2 women, 2 witnesses, both vanished. Marco's jaw clenched. He's not running. He's trying to erase the evidence. 20 minutes later, the DeLuca convoy rolled through abandoned streets where streetlights flickered like dying stars. The warehouse district rose before them, skeletal buildings of rust and broken glass, monuments to an industrial age long dead. Vince pointed to a black Dodge Charger parked outside Warehouse 7, the same one they'd been tracking for weeks. That's his car. Could be a trap, Rico warned, checking his weapon. It is a trap, Marco agreed, but we're walking into it anyway. They approached tactically, spreading out, using the darkness and ruins as cover. Marco led the way, his movements practiced and efficient. He'd done this 100 times, the approach, the confrontation, the violence that usually followed. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt final. The warehouse's main entrance gaped open like a mouth. Inside, weak light filtered through broken skylights, illuminating a vast space of concrete pillars and graffiti-covered walls. And in the center, under a hanging industrial lamp someone had rigged to a generator, stood Darren Cole. He wasn't alone. Eli's mother knelt on the concrete, hands zip-tied behind her back, duct tape across her mouth. Beside her, Jennifer Walsh, in the same condition. Both women's eyes were wide with terror, tracking every movement. Darren held a gun, something heavy, possibly a .45. His other hand clutched a phone. That's far enough, DeLuca. His voice echoed in the cavernous space. I know you're out there. I know you brought your whole crew. Marco stepped into the light, hands visible, empty. Let them go, Darren. This is between us. Between us? Darren laughed bitterly. You destroyed my life, my career, my reputation, everything. Do you know what they're saying about me? What I've become? A truth you always were, Marco said coldly. We just made sure everyone else could see it. I was doing important work. Darren's gun hand trembled. The people I informed on, they were criminals, terrorists, threats to society. I kept this city safe. You sold out families for profit, Marco countered, taking one careful step forward. You helped traffickers, murdered witnesses, and covered up the death of my son. Don't stand there and pretend you were serving justice. Darren's face twisted. Your son was collateral damage in a necessary operation. You think I wanted him dead? It was an accident you profited from, an accident you buried with lies. The generator hummed in the silence that followed. Somewhere, water dripped from a broken pipe, counting seconds like a doomsday clock. Here's what happens now, Darren said, steadying his weapon, pointing it at Eli's mother. You back off. You retract everything, the news stories, the evidence, all of it. You tell them it was fabricated, a vendetta from a criminal organization. And maybe these women live. Marco studied him, the wild eyes, the sweat on his brow, the desperate grip on the gun. This was a man at the end of his rope, capable of anything. You know I can't do that, Marco said quietly. Then they die. Darren pressed the gun against Eli's mother's head. She whimpered behind the tape, tears streaming down her face. They die and it's on you. Another death on Marco DeLuca's conscience. Marco's crew stirred in the shadows, weapons ready, waiting for the signal. One word, and this would end in blood. One word, and Darren Cole would be a memory. But then another voice cut through the tension. Don't. Everyone froze. Eli stepped into the light, small and impossibly brave, his bruised face illuminated by the harsh lamp. He'd somehow followed them, somehow slipped past their security, driven by a child's desperate need to save his mother. Eli, no. Marco reached for him, but the boy walked forward, positioning himself between Marco and Darren. Please don't kill him, Eli said, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. Don't kill anyone. Darren stared at the boy, confusion warring with rage. Kid, get out of here. This doesn't concern you. Yes, it does. Eli looked at his stepfather, the man who'd terrorized him, beaten him, destroyed his childhood. You hurt me. You hurt Mom. You hurt a lot of people. But if he kills you, Eli gestured to Marco, then he becomes like you, and I don't want that. Eli, Marco's voice was rough with emotion. You told me revenge isn't justice. Eli continued, still looking at Marco. You told me we were doing this the right way. Were you lying? The question hung in the air like smoke. Marco met the boy's eyes and saw something that shattered him. Absolute trust. This child believed in him, believed he was better than his worst impulses, believed monsters could choose to be guardians. No, Marco said finally, holstering his weapon. I wasn't lying. He looked at his crew in the shadows. Stand down. Boss, Vince protested. Stand down. The tension shifted, compressed. Darren's eyes darted between Marco and Eli, trying to understand this new dynamic, this unexpected mercy. You're really not going to kill me? Darren's voice was almost childlike in its disbelief. No, Marco said, but I'm not letting you go either. He pulled out his phone, pressed a single button. We're at Warehouse 7, Pike Street. 2 hostages, armed suspect, multiple witnesses. Darren's face went white. You called the cops? I called the FBI, Marco corrected. Your cop friends can't help you anymore. The evidence is everywhere, backed up, distributed. You can kill these women. You can kill us all, but the truth doesn't die with us. It's already out there. You've already lost. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Darren looked at the gun in his hand, at the women on the ground, at the boy standing between him and vengeance. His shoulders sagged. The weapon dropped to the concrete with a clatter that echoed like a gavel's strike. I didn't mean for any of this, he whispered. Yes, Marco said coldly. You did. You just didn't mean to get caught. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights began to strobe through the broken windows. The FBI burst through the entrance, weapons drawn, voices commanding. Marco pulled Eli close as federal agents swarmed Darren, as they cut the women free, as they secured the scene with practiced efficiency. You asked me to kill a monster, Marco said quietly to Eli, watching as they led Darren away in handcuffs. Instead, we buried him alive in the truth. That's a longer death, a harder one. Eli's mother ran to them, sobbing, pulling her son into her arms. Thank you, she gasped to Marco. Thank you. Marco nodded, stepping back. This wasn't his moment. This was theirs. As the FBI processed the scene, Vince approached. Boss, we should go. Before they start asking questions we don't want to answer. Marco took one last look at Eli, safe in his mother's embrace, and felt something he hadn't felt in 8 years. Peace. Not redemption. Not forgiveness. But maybe, just maybe, a step toward both. The safe house felt different in the aftermath, quieter, heavier, like the air itself carried the weight of what they'd chosen not to do. Marco's crew gathered in the main room as dawn broke through the windows. They looked like soldiers after a long campaign, worn, uncertain, questioning the victory they'd won without firing a shot. Rico broke the silence first. We should have finished him. He stood by the window, arms crossed. All that evidence, all that planning, and we just handed him to the feds? Boss, men like Darren don't stay locked up. He's right, Tomas added. We had him. 1 bullet, problem solved. That's how we've always handled problems. You think I made a mistake, Marco said quietly. I think you made a choice, Luca replied carefully. But that choice put us at risk. Darren knows who we are. When he gets a lawyer, we could all go down. Marco walked to the whiteboard, still covered in their web of evidence. He stared at Darren Cole's photograph in the center, surrounded by crimes, victims, lies. You're right, he said finally. Killing him would have been cleaner. Safer. It's what we do, what we've always done. He turned to face his crew. But there was a child watching. A child who came to us asking for murder and instead found something different. Better? Rico scoffed. Boss, we're criminals. We've killed, stolen, destroyed. That kid saw monsters playing hero for a few weeks. That doesn't change what we are. No, Marco agreed. It doesn't change what we were, but it might change what we become. Doc spoke up from the corner. I've been with this crew 15 years. I've seen us do things I'm not proud of. But last night, we saved 2 women and a child without spilling blood. We used the system instead of bypassing it. That's not weakness. That's evolution. Marco's phone buzzed. A text from his federal contact. Darren Cole officially charged with racketeering, witness tampering, conspiracy to commit murder, no bail, trial in 90 days. You're clear. He showed the message to his crew. We're clear. Darren's locked up in federal. No bail, no connections, and every news outlet is covering his trial. He's too visible to disappear. A knock at the door interrupted them. Doc checked the monitor. It's the kid. Eli entered, holding his mother's hand. She looked fragile, but her eyes were clear, alive with hope. We're leaving for the relocation program this afternoon, she said quietly. New names, new city. I wanted to thank you before we go. Eli stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Marco's waist in a fierce hug. You wanted me to kill a monster, Marco said quietly. Instead, we buried him alive. Eli looked up. You didn't just save us. You saved yourself too. You could have been like him, someone who hurts people and doesn't care. But you chose different. Marco knelt one last time, bringing himself to the child's eye level. Where you're going, you'll be safe. But Eli, his voice grew serious. If anyone ever hurts you again, if you ever need help, he pressed a card into the boy's hand. A phone number, nothing else. You call, and I'll come, no matter where you are. Eli clutched the card like a talisman, hugged Marco again, then returned to his mother's side. As they left, the safe house felt emptier. The mission was over. The boy was safe. The monster was caged. So what now? Tomas asked. Business as usual? Marco looked at each of them, these men who'd built an empire with him. No. New rules. No kids, no families, no civilians. We stick to what we know. But the stuff Darren did, the exploitation, the trafficking, we don't touch it. And if we see it, we stop it. Rico laughed bitterly. Now we're vigilantes? Maybe not, Marco admitted. But it's necessary. Because that boy was right, we can choose to be different. Not saints, not heroes. Just less monstrous. As his crew filtered out, Marco remained behind, staring at the whiteboard one last time. He picked up the marker and wrote 4 words beneath Darren Cole's photo. Sometimes mercy is stronger. It wasn't redemption, but maybe it was a start. 3 weeks after Darren Cole's arrest, the city couldn't stop talking about the case. Every news channel ran updates. Every podcast dissected the evidence. They called the mysterious source, who'd exposed everything, the ghost of the alleys. Marco watched the coverage from his penthouse office, a bitter smile on his face. If they only knew the ghost was a crime lord who'd spent 20 years building the kind of empire he'd just helped destroy. You're trending again, Luca announced, walking in with a tablet. Number 3 nationwide. They're making t-shirts, boss. The ghost merchandise. Marco scrolled through endless posts. People calling him a hero. Conspiracy theorists insisting he was CIA, FBI, foreign intelligence. None imagining he was simply a father who'd found a second chance. The Volkov crew is getting nervous, Vince reported. They lost their inside man. Their witness protection hits dried up. They're scrambling. Good, Marco said. Let them scramble. They're also asking questions about who took down their asset. Some are sniffing around our territory. Marco closed the tablet. Let them connect the dots. By the time they figure it out, Darren's trial will be over. Everything will be public record. The trial had become a media spectacle. Federal prosecutors paraded witness after witness: Jennifer Walsh, Detective Howard, who'd taken a plea deal, even some of Darren's old colleagues. Eli's mother testified too, though her identity remained protected. And through it all, Darren Cole sat at the defense table, his lawyers fighting a battle already lost. Verdicts expected next week, Tomas said. Prosecutions calling it one of the most clear-cut corruption cases in state history. Sentencing? Doc asked. Minimum 25 years, Maximum life. He'll be in prison. Marco's phone rang, unknown number. Yes? Mr. DeLuca? A woman's voice. Professional. This is Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. I wanted to thank you personally. Marco put the phone on speaker. I'm not sure what you're thanking me for, Agent Chen. A soft laugh. I'm sure it's purely coincidental that Darren Cole's victims were under surveillance by your organization before his arrest. If we were under surveillance, you'd be arresting me, not thanking me. True. But Mr. DeLuca, I'll be direct. I know what you are. I've had a file on you for 5 years. But what you did with Darren Cole that bought you something. Respect. And time. Not immunity, never that. But acknowledgement that maybe, occasionally, criminals can serve justice when the system fails. Her voice hardened. Don't make me regret this call. Wouldn't dream of it, Agent Chen. She hung up. Well, Vince said. That was either great news or the worst trap ever. Both probably, Marco agreed. She's watching but not moving, which means we stay cleaner than we've been. A week later, the verdict. Guilty, on all counts. Darren Cole was sentenced to 45 years in a federal supermax facility. No parole. Just decades of concrete and silence. That night, Marco visited the alley where it had all started. He stood alone, letting the city's noise wash over him, thinking about choices and consequences. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Thank you for saving my mom. Thank you for being different. Eli. Safe. Relocated. Starting over. Marco typed back. Stay safe, kid. Stay strong. Remember, you saved us as much as we saved you. He sent it, then deleted the conversation. As he walked back to his car, Marco caught his reflection in a darkened window. He looked the same hard eyes, same scarred knuckles, but something inside had shifted. He was still a criminal, still dangerous, but he was also, for one bloodied child, for one terrified mother, something else. The ghost of the alleys. And maybe that was enough. 7 years later, the alley looked the same, still shadowed, still smelling of rain and grease, still humming with the city's eternal noise. But the person standing in the light was different. Eli wasn't 8 anymore. He was 15 taller, broader, with his mother's gentle eyes but a harder set to his jaw. The bruises were gone, replaced by teenage wear. A skateboarding scar, boxing scraped knuckles, confident posture. He wore a dark hoodie, jeans, worn sneakers. In his hands, $700 bills, crisp and new, so different from the blood-stained ones 7 years ago. Carefully, he knelt and placed the money on the pavement. Then he stood and spoke to the empty alley. The night I asked a killer for help was the night I met the man who saved us all. His voice had deepened but carried the same sincerity. I know you're listening. I know you have people watching. I needed to come. I needed to say thank you. From the darkness, Marco emerged, older now, moving carefully. He stepped into the light. You shouldn't be here, Marco said. You're supposed to be in Montana. Safe. I am safe. Because of you. Eli gestured to the money. $700, same amount. But this time, it's not payment for murder. It's a tribute. A thank you. Marco approached, studied the young man Eli had become. Your mother? Teaching at a community college. She's happy. Really happy. She doesn't flinch anymore. Eli smiled. You gave her that. The FBI gave you that. The Witness Protection Program. No, Eli said firmly. You did. You could have killed him, but you chose something harder, something better. Marco bent down, picked up the bills, counted them. You kept this for 7 years? I earned it, saved it specifically for this. Eli met Marco's eyes. That night, I tried to buy a murder. Tonight, I'm trying to buy closure. Marco held out the bills. Take these back. You don't owe me anything. Keep them. Donate them. Burn them. But I needed to complete the circle. That scared 8-year-old needs to know he gave something back. Marco pocketed the money slowly, nodded. Your mother know you're here? She will when I call from the bus station. You are a friend. A weird, criminal friend. But a friend. I'm not your friend, Eli. You're the man who saved my life. Eli interrupted. Who showed me that people aren't just one thing. That mercy isn't weakness. That the world isn't just monsters and victims. Marco was quiet, walls threatening to crumble under this teenager's gratitude. What are you going to do? He asked finally. With your new life. What's the plan? Eli straightened. Law school. I want to be a prosecutor. Want to put away people like Darren. It's a good plan, Marco said. The system needs people who understand what failure looks like. Eli stepped forward, extended his hand. Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. For everything you did. For everything you didn't do. For showing me that choosing mercy isn't choosing weakness. Marco shook his hand, firm, confident, equals. Stay clean, kid. And if you become a prosecutor, I'll remember that not all criminals are monsters. Eli finished. And not all heroes wear badges. As Eli turned to leave, Marco called after him. That night, you know what I should have said? That a life is worth more than money. That revenge destroys the person seeking it. Marco smiled slightly. But I didn't know that yet. You taught me. Eli's eyes glistened. He nodded once, then disappeared into the city. Marco remained alone, the $700 heavy in his pocket. From his phone, he messaged his crew. New rule. We look for more Ellis. Kids caught in bad situations. We help them the right way. Anonymous tips. Protection. When we need to be the ghost, we will be. Response came quickly. Agreement. Commitment. Purpose. Marco whispered to the empty alley. Sometimes the hardest hit is the one you don't throw. He walked away, the city swallowing him whole. The ghost had served his purpose. Now the man could learn to live without him. Thanks for sticking with this story till the end. If you enjoyed it, you're going to love the next one. It's packed with unexpected turns and heartfelt moments. Click the image on your screen to keep the journey going, and make sure to hit subscribe for more amazing stories. Drop a comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I can't wait to see what you think.